G'day everybody and welcome back. My name is Sean and this is RFDHobby. Now today we're going to be talking about something a little bit different. I'm just going to show you through the project I've been doing over the last couple of months. This is just a 1/10 scale radio controlled truck. Now I've made a lot of changes to make this thing fit and look as you see it here. So I don't have a build video for this entire project, but I am going to take you through how I did it and some tips and tricks if you want to try this. Now this is printed in resin, and generally I imagine that's not recommended for this type of build just because it's a little bit more brittle than FDM printing, and I get that. So this thing is probably more intended just to be a bit of fun and, you know, probably sit on my shelf more than anything. But anyway, let's take a closer look and maybe you can have a crack at it yourself. It's still a work in progress. I have a few bits and pieces I'm waiting for. Let's get down and have a bit of a closer look at it. Alright, so here we are. Now this is a 1/10 scale body that I've put onto a pre-bought chassis. This thing was originally a G-made sawback. Let me just show you what it looked like originally. And here we are. So this is the body that it originally came with. These are not the original wheels. These are the original wheels that came with this. So these are just glued onto the rims here. These ones set on here. So a little bit bigger than the tires I have on there now. Now this body, it's a cool body. It does look good. There's no lights or light wells or anything. It's pretty basic, but it is still a very cool body. This does fold forward. You know, so it's a cool body, but it's very lightweight. Part of the reason I bought this actual ready-to-run kit, so this comes with a motor and all your electronics. The only thing you need to get for this is some batteries to run it. I have added this thing at the front here. As I said, the wheels have changed, and a few changes just to where these mounts are. And I've also added magnets. But apart from that, this is just a stock body. I haven't made any other adjustments to this at this stage. As for the body I made, I will just put this to the side for a second so we can have a look at that a bit closer. This is a work in progress. So I've still got some things I'm doing here, and one of them being the interior. So I'll just take that out of the way. I should just point out that this body, this design for this body, I've purchased this online, and it was quite cheap, I think $15 or so. It actually is designed for FDM printing, I believe. Because I do have the Elegoo Saturn 8K, it does have quite a large print bed. So just to give you an idea, this is actually comes in through 5 or 6 files. So I've got these two pieces here, which I was able to print on the printer, no problem. These just then glued together, which wasn't easy, but it did come together okay, and I'll just show you underneath. So it does line up quite well, and takes a bit of sanding, but it'll get you there. So that makes the tray, which is fine. The next piece of the file is the cab, which is basically this section here. Now this was too big for my printer, didn't quite fit on there, so I've actually had to cut this. And if we get in, you know, you don't have to get too close, but you can see these little worlds here where I've had to fix that back together, because I've actually had to go into Blender, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I've actually taken the top off the cab here and made that then 2 separate prints so that I was able to fit that on the printer. And finally you've got the front, which is the 2 fenders and the bumper here, and then the hood is also separate, and the grille here comes separately as well. Now this piece behind here that you can see, this is just with my own design. This is just, believe it or not, it's just some steel mesh, some very fine mesh in here, and some sprues added, and I've just glued that. Just there was a big gap there behind this grille that they give you to print. The other thing I've done here is I've actually added for the lights, I've just got some old, you might recognize this, it's actually speaker mesh from, you know, speakers in cars and stuff like that. So I've just sort of cut out rough circles here and then pounded them into the dome shapes I wanted for the lights. I don't know if you can see that. But anyway, I've shaped them into the, you know, the headlight shapes, and I do plan on putting some LEDs in behind there soon as well, just waiting for some parts to come. I've added on some details here on the outside, so the door handles and the mirrors. Now, being that these are printed in resin, these mirrors will snap all the time, so, you know, you just have to take that as it is. I don't have an FDM printer, so I just got to do what I can do here. Now, as for these, the other thing is these windows I've put in. This is actually just packaging plastic. In here, what we've got is just packaging plastic that I've just cut to shape and super glued. So that's fine. You do have to be a bit careful with your super glue. You don't want it to run on the outside. It will make it very difficult. Now, when it comes to putting in the actual windscreen, you've just got to take it slow. You kind of need 3 hands to do it, but you'll manage with 2, and you've just got to slowly press it in and glue it as you go. You want this to be as trimmed as possible to the edge you want. You don't want this to be hanging down too far here. It makes it really hard if you want to put an interior in to get your dashboard to sit up properly, which is the problem I'm currently having at the moment. Now you can see I've also had a little interior mirror and some other details here, which I'll just flip over so you can have a look at that. So now on the inside, I've just started, you can see here, I've got my little mirror, shotgun in the back there, and that's just a piece I picked up at the toy store for a couple of bucks and just made it fit in there. And I do have some other interior pieces going in. Now printing this was, I've used Sunlu standard resin for this, and it was fine. I had a couple of fails, which is to be expected, given I don't know what I'm doing. But the settings for it were very just default basic settings. But it's sturdy enough. Now, I wouldn't roll this down a hill, but it works. It's working brilliantly. I haven't had any issues with the resin print, other than where I tried to drill it at one point and I did crack the resin, but I was just trying to push through and drill too hard. I've drilled it since like 6 times and I've had no issues at all. So it's just taking it easy with the drilling. Sanding it takes a lot of sanding. It's hard to see, but part of the file comes with these little lines that are on it here, which made the painting process very different from what I had intended, which I'll go over shortly. But let me just take you through this mechanism at the back here, which isn't quite complete yet. So this is actually just constructed with balsa wood, which I've weathered, obviously. This is just some cardboard here to kind of glue these together to make it look like, you know, metal. And this is just jewelry chain, a nail pressed in to hold that in place there. Now these are not real. These little bolt heads you see here, these are actually, I've just used a hex screw, actually. Oh, sorry, a hex driver. You know, for the screws, and I've just hammered that through some cardboard, and it'll actually make out these little tiny, as you can see here, these little tiny hex screw things that I placed around different areas. You know, they look kind of cool. Just those little details make the differences, you know. This is just some steel mesh from a thing I picked up in the kitchen section. It's like a splatter tray for a fry pan or something, but it's just like fly screen, I guess. And that's fine. That's just so I can hang some of these things on here. These need to be weathered still. Now, as from this mechanism, 2 nails pressed in here. These can easily be pulled out if you want to. Jewelry chain just up to here. This is copper pipe, and I used this because it was around. That's what I had. Same with the bolster and stuff. There's probably better materials, but this is what I had, and it seems to be working fine. The copper pipe is great because it's easy to work with. This is just hammered, cut with some... you know, you could probably cut this with pliers. I had some tin cutters or something to use on those, and just pressed and drilled. And I've done the same down here, and I just attached these on each side, just with some screws. That gives and the way I've cut them at the bottom here, it just gives them some, I'll take this wire out, gives them some movement here, which is kind of what I wanted, which is why I put this tire in here. Now, I could mount rubber in there somehow, some other way, but the tire looks pretty good. All I do is lift this up a little bit, push my tire in place, and what that gives me is some flex here on this before it actually starts putting any pressure on here or here, which is kind of cool. I like that. Now, I do have a winch planned to go in here, and that'll be fun, but I haven't got there yet. Little light works on top. I'm not real happy with this. It's the wrong sort of scale. I do have another one which is smaller, which is probably better suited for this, which should probably go up the back here, but it requires wiring, and I have no problem wiring it. It's just I don't want to see the wires or have the wires visible, so it's just one of the pain in the ass to deal with if I put wires on the light. Whereas this one is just one of those little brooder ones, which has got the battery in there, so that works out okay. So for the time being, this is cool. It's just going to sit on my shelf. I mean, let's be honest. It does drive, and it drives really well, and I have a lot of fun with it. But I mean, you know, at the end of the day, I make these things, you know, they're fun for a little while, and then I put them on the shelf and move on to my next project. Now, as for how this sits on here, like I said, I've just moved these posts here. I didn't want any body posts through the bonnet, so that's where you'll see these magnets here. There are a couple of magnets mounted just up under here as well, and that just lets this thing sort of sit here. And I do have a couple of little body posts that'll poke through here, as you can see, but I mean, you can barely see them, you know, they're small enough to be out of the way and not a problem at all. So I will say that the interior is a little bit trickier than I expected. Started using some styrene here. My first attempt at using styrene, really. And this is, I'm okay. This is okay, it's coming along pretty well. Obviously I've made this out of wood because I'm much more comfortable with that. This is my bench seat, and all I really need now is a steering wheel and some paint on this, and I'll be happy with it. With this being resin printed, I didn't have layer lines as much as you would expect in an FDM print. However, there are still lines, some sections of the build that are hard to sand out completely flat. So I'm not sure if this is going to pick any of these up, but you can kind of just see these little lines there. Now I've sanded this out nearly entirely, but you can still see them there in the shine. Now the only real issue I had with that was originally I had planned to paint this, put a metallic base, put an overcoat over that, and then sand back to get my metallic look coming out. The real problem with that is with those slight lines there, I'm not sure what you'd call them, but with those slight bumps throughout the curves on the build here, what you tend to get, even after you've sanded them, is if you're trying to take the paint back, you'll see those lines way more. What I ended up doing was putting the main color on here, which is like a brown red, and then I've gone in and essentially dry brushed the metallic over the top. So I've gone backwards, really. Rather than taking the paint back to the metal, I've actually covered the paint with the metallic. And the trick to doing that is using a very dry brush and just dabbing over and over and over and slowly building that up, rather than trying to paint any color on. Just using that dry brush and really stippling it and just building up the little patches and parts of the metallic where you want them. I'm enjoying this sort of project. Oh shit, look, I've snapped the mirror off already. It's fun to be able to take something like this outside and drive it around, whereas you can't really do that with other scale models and miniatures. So I've had so much fun with this, and I honestly feel like this should be a kind of a Mad Max vehicle. So I'm gonna have to go down that path soon, I think, and try doing something like that. You know, some sort of drivable Mad Max car would be so much fun. But I'll finish this off first. I'll do another video when it's all done, and I can show you out running and working and how it goes. If you have enjoyed the video, remember, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate all the support. Take care and all the best, and I'll see you in the next video.